Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight we've got some seriously creepy stalker stories in store. Love that alliteration. I'd also like to let you know that I narrated a really interesting story for Forgotten Lives, which should be launching today. I'll leave the link at the end of the video and the description if you would like to listen, which I do highly recommend. Finally, trigger warning. The last story is a tiny bit graphic and you might be triggered. So, if that's you, skip the story. In any case, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I'm a 23-year-old female. I live in a townhouse with my 2 children of ages 2 and 6 months. My fiancé did live with us until 2 weeks ago, when I caught him with another woman and made him move out. That's important to the story. I'm a stay-at-home mum, and when he did live with us, my ex worked evenings. Let me set the scene. We live in a tiny house in northern Pennsylvania. My line of townhouses sits in front of a big field that runs in line with the woods. As far as I'm aware, these woods stretch for at least a few miles, and I'm not aware of any houses in the area or any roads that lead through them. My living room has 3 windows that look to the field, and my bedroom on the 2nd floor only has 1 window that faces that way as well. People do tend to walk their dogs back in the field, and kids sometimes play there, but I rarely ever see anyone close to my house. For that reason, I tend to leave my blinds and curtains open, partially because I just enjoy the view. July 2019, a year ago, I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep. All the lights were off, but I had my window and blinds open since it was warm. I was looking out the window, and I noticed small red and white lights just outside. I got up and looked to realize the lights were coming from a drone. I ran downstairs to where my fiancé of the time was sitting in the living room and ran to the window. I told him what I saw, but of course, when he went to look, it was gone. I was paranoid that the drone could have had a camera on it, and someone was watching me with it. I kept my blinds closed for a while after that. Fast forward to January of this year. I stupidly got comfortable and assumed that whoever it was flying the drone was a one-time creep. My blinds were open, and I had just gotten out of the shower. I was sitting on my bed, pretty much in my birthday suit except for my underwear, scrolling on my phone, when out of the corner of my eye I saw lights again from the dark window. It was that drone again. I ran out of the room and waited for a few minutes. I peeked back into my room and it was gone. I quickly shut my blinds again and got dressed. Honestly, I felt sick at how stupid I was to leave my window open again, especially when I was practically undressed. Now for the really disturbing part. My 2-year-old son and I were out in the field 2 weeks ago, 3 days after I kicked out my boyfriend. We were playing ball. I had my 6-month-old strapped to me in a baby carrier. Probably about a half hour after we'd been out there, I heard a slight whirring noise coming towards us. I looked up and saw that damn drone flying towards us. I looked around and didn't see anyone. It stopped right over us. I freaked and grabbed my son and dragged him into the house, looking back at the tree line every so often as we went. I knew they had to be hiding in there. I went inside, closed the blinds, and called my mum and told her about the situation. She told me to just keep an eye out, and I said I would. My son likes to line up his toys along the windowsill, so I figured it wouldn't hurt to open them up just an inch or so. A little while later, after we ate dinner, it was almost dark. I was feeding my 6-month-old, and my son was playing. He was standing over by the window lining up his toys, and he started saying, "Dada, Dada." I assume he was just missing his father, and dismissed him by saying he was going to see him that weekend. He kept saying, "Dada, Dada." I looked up and saw him pointing to the window, under the little gap the blinds didn't cover. I froze. I remember that he calls any man with facial hair Dada because it reminds him of his father. But there was no way someone would be bold enough to actually come up to my window. Not when my neighbors are literally right there. Anyone could see them. But there aren't any lights back there. So unless someone actually stepped out their house, I guess no one would see them. Maybe it was my ex, but he should be at work at that time. I ran to the window and moved my son, and I didn't want to lift the blinds, but honestly, I was sure it had to be the person who'd been creeping on me for the past year, but I wanted to see who it was. I pushed the blinds up, and I was looking at a man that I had never seen before, crouching in front of me. He was bald with a moustache and goatee. I have no idea how old he was. He could have been anywhere from 30 to 50. When he saw me, he smiled and stood up. I yelled and told him to leave and that I was calling the cops. He just stood there, smiling at me like some freak. I was about to close the blinds again when he said something I couldn't hear. I told him to leave again, and he said it louder this time. "I just want to talk to you." I shook my head. "No." And he yelled the same thing over. He started slapping his hands on the window, yelling "no, no, no" over and over. I grabbed my phone, scared he was trying to break in, and dialed 911. My kids were crying from the yelling, and I was on the verge of tears. I told the operator what was going on. The whole time I was on the phone, the man was pounding on my window, screaming. He was yelling all kinds of nonsense, and I only caught some of it. He said he's been watching me for months, that I'm beautiful, and he wants me to come with him, and that he'll end the lives of the little ones if I didn't. The operator told me to go into an upstairs room and hide until the police arrive. My town doesn't have a police department, so we rely on the state police, and she said it would be about 20 minutes, but just to stay on the phone with her. The man was practically punching my window now, and was screaming like a maniac. I was about to grab my kids and run upstairs when I heard someone else screaming. The man bolted. I looked out and saw my neighbor and his girlfriend. I opened the window, and my neighbor said that he heard the man, so he ran around the building. He said when the guy heard him, he ran back into the woods and disappeared into the tree line. They said they also had called the police. I thanked them 100 times, and the police got there 10 minutes later. They did a quick search around the buildings and in the trees, but obviously didn't find anything. I've been super paranoid since then, and stayed at my parents' a few nights after it happened. I don't know why that guy targeted me, or why he waited so long to do something. I'm just happy my neighbors were there to intervene, or who knows what would have happened. So to the creep who's been following me and my family for the last year, I genuinely hope we never meet again. This past Friday, I, a 27-year-old male, fell asleep around 8 p.m. after work. When I woke up around 9, I decided it was too late to go out, so I made a plan to run to the gym down the street instead for a late-night workout. The small all-men's gym is just about a mile down the road. It was empty and dark inside, but the owner had given me a door code to get in. However, for whatever reason, the code wasn't working, and I could not get to the gym. I wanted to work out, so I decided I would just extend my run and head up to the local middle school playground and do some pull-ups on the monkey bars instead. I figured it was better than no workout at all. I got to the block that the middle school was on and began walking down towards the playground. On the way, I passed 2 young girls walking in the opposite direction. I would guess they looked about 11 or 12. They were silent and looked at me nervously as we passed. Understandable, as I'm a reasonably large man standing at 6'4" at almost 10 p.m. on an empty street at night. I live in a little suburban town of about 12,000 people, with little crime. It's a dry town with mostly larger residential homes. The town is only 2 miles across and is very safe, has a family feel, and most of the residents are upper-class families that take advantage of the great school system. Despite the reputation of safety the town has, I thought it was much too late and dark for these 2 young girls to be wandering the streets alone, and creeps can show up anywhere at any time. Something I would soon enough witness to be true. I hope they're heading home, I thought to myself. I then got to the playground attached to the middle school. The playground is on the corner of the block, with an alley leading to the parking lot behind the school, separating the playground from the local high-speed line going into the nearby city about 10 miles away. The high-speed line is built underground, with an open top and high walls topped off with a chain-link fence to keep pedestrians from falling in. There is a bridge to cross the tracks below, and then another street on the other side of the tracks from the school running parallel to the rails, with one way going into the downtown business district and the other way going into a residential neighborhood. The young girls turn on this street, going towards the neighborhood away from downtown. I did 1 set of pull-ups on the monkey bars and was resting when I noticed a white pickup truck with the headlights cut, and a raised cab with blacked-out windows covering the bed of the pickup truck, moving slowly past the middle school in the same direction of the girls moments before. I found this very suspicious, and even more so once the truck stopped directly in front of the playground, almost as though the driver/passenger was checking it out. I stared at the truck, wondering what was going on, when I noticed there was a man walking about 20 feet behind the truck in the same direction. As he passed the stopped truck, the window of the truck was rolled down and I could see there were 2 men in it. I clearly saw them look over and made a keep going forward hand signal to the driver/passenger, which followed his direction and started moving again, creeping slowly along with the headlights cut just as they were before. I watched as they crossed the tracks and saw the man on foot go right on the parallel road along the tracks towards downtown, while the truck went left on the same street towards the residential neighborhood in the same direction the young girls had gone no less than 3 minutes before. What the hell did I just witness, I thought to myself, as I tried to make sense of what I had just seen. To me, it seemed that the truck and man on foot were following the young girls, stopped at the playground to see if that's where they were going, and kept going when they only saw me doing pull-ups. I felt sick to my stomach. I tried to think of what else these men could have been up to, looking for a lost dog? No, they weren't calling out, and were driving much too slowly. Doing a deal? Maybe. But what kind of deal goes down in a fairly well-lit school area? Also, the man on foot signaling the truck forwards, and then going the opposite way down the next cross street did not make any sense. In my head, I thought at best what I saw was some kind of deal, and at worst was 2 predators. I decided to follow the man on foot to find out. I followed him as he walked along the wall separating the sidewalk from the tracks below. On the other side of the street was a church and some office buildings. He was slowly walking and texting someone on his phone. I turned around and saw the truck had stopped again about 2 blocks up the road in the opposite direction. The man on foot then completely stopped as I approached him. I couldn't be sure as to whether he realized I was pursuing him, so I approached him in the most casual way possible. The man looked to be in his early 30s, stood to about 5'10", with a slouch, had curly hair with a noticeable scar going down the side of his head through his hair. From the moment I began to speak, this man, I could tell, was very nervous. The way he acted and spoke with me made me even more suspicious up until the conclusion of our conversation. Admittedly, my adrenaline was going, so I don't remember how the conversation went word for word, but this is pretty much it. "Hey man, what's up? What are you doing?" Not much. Just hanging out." "Just hanging out, huh? Where you going?" "Just on a walk." "I saw you signaling to that sketchy truck back at the playground. That was kinda weird. What's up with that?" Nothing at all. I just waved at them as I walked by." "You didn't just wave at them. I saw you make a hand signal for them to keep going." I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know them." "I'm not stupid. I clearly saw you signal them. I know you know them. Just tell me what you're really doing out here, because it's very suspicious." The creep at this point then nervously starts walking away from me. "I'm not up to anything." I put my hand on the man's shoulder to stop him. "No, stop. Tell me what you're doing right now. You're acting very sketchy, and it's making me nervous. I know you're up to something, so tell me the truth. I don't care if you're doing a deal or whatever." "I'm not doing anything. I swear I'm a good Christian man. I swear." Then he points to a church behind me across the street, and me, as suspicious as ever, replies, "I didn't ask your religion, what you were, or whether you're a good person or not. I asked what you're doing with that sketchy truck. Now, do you want to tell me, or should I call the police and have them come ask you?" "You can call the police. I'm not up to anything. Leave me alone. I'm scared." The man then turned to start walking away, faster this time. I admit I was quite angry at this point, and I knew I was clearly being lied to, and this guy was definitely up to no good. I push him very hard with one arm to get him to stop. The dude loses his balance and almost falls over, but then immediately starts sprinting away from me down the street, turns the corner, and then continues to sprint into the downtown business district, passing right past a few other pedestrians on the street. There was no reason for me to chase him, so I lost sight of him as he ran away. I looked back at the truck down the road that was stopped at the beginning of the confrontation, and it was gone. I then take out my cell phone and call the non-emergency police line to report everything. The police thanked me and sent a patrol car to the area by the middle school. When I told my girlfriend about what happened, she was very upset with me for following and confronting the man. However, after what I saw, I'm still convinced that I witnessed 3 men stalking 2 underage girls, possibly with intent. I could not come up with any other explanation as to what could have possibly been going on. Seeing how nervous the man was talking to me, paired with how he lied and then took off running, only further convinced me of what I saw. I followed my gut instinct and took action. I would do it all again. However, I would have called the police before confronting the man myself if I could redo the whole thing. My girlfriend's concern was for my safety, although I was much bigger than the man and made sure he was at least at arm's length at me at all times. He could have been armed, so I understand her concern. At the very least, I hope I thwarted a possible crime. And for the creep that ran away, let's not meet again. This first started when I first moved into my new place, last summer in 2019. I live with my landlord, her elderly mum, and my friend Daisy. I also started a new job working night shifts at a hotel, so I was up most nights. I'm going to preface this story with some background info that will help everything make sense. Since my landlord knew her neighbors very well, as she lived in this house all her life and there is hardly any street parking, I was able to park in the vacant house's driveway, directly parallel across the street from ours. When I park my car, I can see the front of my place with my rearview mirrors. Our house is right in front of a very busy stop sign, so seeing/hearing traffic is something we all have to get used to. Daisy and I identify as women and are best friends that met in college. We've known each other for a few years at this point and did everything together. I remember it was a warm summer Thursday night. Daisy and I loved to leave the house past midnight, eat terrible fast food, roll the windows down and drive along the coast. It was around 1:45 a.m. as I finally pulled up to my parking spot. We sat in the car for a while, listening to music and finishing the last bit of our late night munchies. My windows were up by this time, but we could hear a bigger car like a diesel approaching the stop sign. Of course, it was a stereotypical white van that prompted me to joke, "Daisy, look at that creepy white van." From my rearview mirror, the next thing we knew, we saw what looked like a thin man pick up his camera from the passenger side and took at least 5 pictures of the front of our house with the flash on. Daisy and I silently looked at each other, in horror as the van sped off. The next day, Daisy and I told our landlord about the incident and told us this was not the first time one of her tenants reported this. Though she brushed it off despite us telling her that anyone taking pictures of her house late at night did not have good intentions, it really put me and Daisy on edge. Some time has passed as the coronavirus pandemic crept its way into the US towards the end of 2019. I was going to file a police report, as I eventually caught most of the person's license plate after what felt like months of investigating. At the beginning of February 2020, the van stopped coming, which caused me to think the pandemic either may have gotten the person sick or affected them in some way. Although the person didn't take any more pictures as far as I saw, when the van drove by, it came from the same direction every time, around 1 to 1:30. It would stop for an eerily long amount of time and then would speed off out of nowhere, as if the person were racing another car that was never there. I did stop investigating after 2 weeks of nothing. I still get very anxious if I hear a loud, diesel-like vehicle drive by late at night. I don't know what the person wanted or why they were taking pictures of my landlord's house. Maybe once quarantine is lifted, I might investigate again to ensure that the creep comes no more for his late-night visits. I got my first job at 15. Working in the local convenience store for under-the-table paychecks until I turned 16 so they could legally hire me. They needed staff they could underpay, and I needed money to support my family. Plus, the store was literally 10 minutes from my house, so I could go home for lunch or go jogging in the field next to the store. I'm a very friendly person and loved to make conversation because it helped the day go by faster. One morning, a guy in his late 20s to early 30s came into the store to receive a click-and-collect package, and the system was being really slow, so I asked him about his previous evening. It had been Guy Fawkes night, so it was my topic of conversation with everyone that day. He didn't appear to want to talk much, and so I overcompensated with my own talking, so there wasn't any awkward silence while the parcels were scanning, and I told him about how my dog hates fireworks, so I stayed inside with him. He then asked me when the store closes, which so many people at my store do, that I didn't find this information weird. I told him it was going to close at 3 p.m. because it's Sunday. He left with his parcels, and I literally didn't think of him at all again. I took my break at midday and went on my usual laps around the field after getting rid of my work uniform. And as it was fairly cold, no one else was on the field. I'm on the opposite side and I look to my left, because I'm dramatically singing along to Hamilton with my headphones in, and there's some guy sitting alone on the children's swing set in the park. Because it's pretty cold, and I'm embarrassed by feeling watched, I finished my jog there and finished my break inside the stockroom drinking tea. Again, this didn't faze me, because there are always weirdos hanging around my area, and many of them I know because of how close the community is. I finished my shift at 4 after cleaning and restocking for the next day, and was let out through the back exit car park that was shared with a dilapidated pub. Funnily enough, that one I have many childhood memories of before it closed down, because my parents and I have lived on this estate our entire lives. Some guy was sitting on the wall there with his coat hood pulled up. This was slightly strange, because nothing around the area was open, and hadn't been for at least an hour, especially not the pub, but I was 15 and I'd taken the same walk down the main road every single shift without issue. I put my headphones in with a slight pinch of anxiety, because as soon as I moved past this guy, I saw him jump up from the wall from the corner of my eye. I don't put music on, I just listen to his footsteps follow me until he's next to me and gesturing for me to remove my headphones. As you probably guessed, it's the same guy from the morning shift. I'm quite confused at this point, because it's the first time I'd seen him in my local store. We have a lot of regulars, and I would even know most of them by address because we saved everyone's newspaper, but I'd never seen him before, only encountered him twice in one day. I removed my headphones and asked what he wanted. He asked me for the time, and I assumed, because we live on a council estate, that perhaps he was going to mug me. It's happened before. I told him 4 p.m. without taking my phone out. Then he proceeds to pretend he only just recognized me from the store and tells me he thought I finished at 3. I've watched enough true crime to be guessing he'd waited for me to finish my shift for an hour. I was having a mild panic attack at this point because it was a lazy cold Sunday, so nobody was around, and I wasn't yet at the main road. So I continued to talk with him while he questioned me about how long I'd worked there at the store. I know it's stupid to engage, but he was keeping my pace right next to me, and the main road was only down the street where I thought our paths would diverge. He asked me if I worked there all the time, and in an effort to dissuade him from trying to hit on me, I told him I was still studying, although I would not tell him at which institution. My being a minor didn't seem to quite deter him. Mind you, at the age I am now, being 20, I just look about 15. Like I said, he was undeterred and tried asking for my number, in which I told him I didn't have a phone, an obvious lie because my headphones were plugged into them, and I was tightly gripping my pocket. He brought this up, and I told him that I shared a phone, but I didn't have my own. Despite this being an obvious lie, he continued. I was on the main road now, but he had not stopped talking, and my quickest way home, the path I usually took, was through a dark wooded area and then a shady parking lot. I opted for the longer way to keep myself on public roads so he wouldn't know where my house was located. He asked for my Facebook, and I desperately wanted to get away from him at this point, so I thought if I gave him my Facebook and then changed my name as soon as I had the chance, he would be unable to find me. I don't know why I just didn't give him a fake name. I was young and stupid, and honestly was just scared that no cars had passed yet and he was still tailing me. After this, I asked him which way he lived, and he told me only a short while up ahead, and asked me if I was interested in coming along with him. I said I live in this other direction and would say goodbye now, but that we could speak again later. I know I'm an idiot, but I thought if he thought I was interested in speaking to him, he would leave me alone. And because of my experience in talking to people in this job, this came off very casually and truthfully. It worked. I crossed the road, and as soon as I was out of sight, I legged it back down to the other side of the road and got home. When home, I went to change my name but found he had already messaged me. Although I had not told him my middle name, that was a part of my Facebook, which he brought up to me in his first message. I messaged him back explaining I had no interest in him and instantly blocked his account. I felt so stupid for even letting him have my real name that I couldn't bring myself to tell my parents. Instead, I asked my brother to meet me at the store at the end of my shifts. It was only Sundays. I finished an hour late because I wanted them to help me pick out ingredients for dinner that night. My first shift back, he was waiting outside in the same area, but my brother was with me, and we went around the front way so I could see him waiting there, but didn't have to walk past him. After this, I decided I couldn't keep getting escorts home and told my work I needed to leave at different times in case he followed me. They wanted to tell authorities, but I refused because it was a relatively small thing and I was working illegally there and didn't want to get them in trouble. I told my parents, and they told a few people in the neighborhood to be wary. I started getting the bus home from school because I was worried he had my Facebook and now knew where I went to school. The next time I saw him, he came into the store again to collect parcels. I told my manager next to me, and she served him while also telling him they could call someone if he continued to harass me. I was scared about all the information he now had from my Facebook, because I was a young kid, and my privacy settings were crap, and held my country, my school, hundreds of my pictures with friends in my neighborhood, at the school I was going to, and all of them were tagged. Fortunately, nothing more happened after this. I saw him once on the bus with my mother a year later, and this was while I was in college and at a shopping center. I'd quit my job a little while after this to work elsewhere legally when I turned 16 to earn more money, and I live in a different city now. He doesn't scare me anymore, but I definitely am way more private about my life on social media. Everything is on private, and I don't provide my real information for certain sites. This was a little story about my experience having a minor stalker. Obviously, I still blame myself for being dumb and having all my private information out there, but I still thought it would be an interesting thing to share. This happened about 2 years ago, and still scares me when I think about it. First, a little background. My name's Jesse and I live in the UK, and I'm from a smallish area, nothing fancy. I'm 18, and at the time of this story I was 16 and working at a family friend's pub collecting glasses. I'd work from 7 till 11 at night and lived about a half an hour away to 45 minutes. To get home, I had to walk through a park. Now, this park has 3 entrances. 2 at the top and 1 at the bottom, which leads into the town/center and main shopping area. The top 2 lead to 2 different areas. One is a skate park, and the other is literally right next to a comprehensive school in a big field. This school has a lot of bushes and trees in it, and only has a few lights. The only lights are on the lampposts outside each entrance to the park, which are very dimly lit. Each entrance was a big gate, and they were always open. It's important to note this for later. I had to walk the path that leads towards the school, since it was the fastest way home. Now onto the story. I worked at the pub for a year, and had stuck to the same routine going home. I'd leave around 11, sometimes a few minutes before something, sometimes a few minutes before, sometimes a few minutes after, and it took about 10 minutes to get to the park, so I'd be walking through the park at around 11:30, give or take. Now the one entrance I had to use to get into the park was the one at the bottom, the one that leads to the shopping area. It had 1 lamppost outside the gate, and that was it. That was the only light, so I could see about 10 foot into the park, and there was a few benches. No one was ever in the park when I walked through it from work. During the autumn/winter weeks, it was always empty. Even the streets were. So you could imagine my shock when I saw a man sitting on the bench as I walked through the park gates. Now this was so strange. Around 11:45, almost 12, it's pitch black and freezing, and this dude is just chilling on the bench. I couldn't see him too well at first, but as I got closer I got a good look at him. He was young, 20 to 25, long hair in a ponytail, but not a scruffy one. It was tight and neat. He had a hoop earring and his nose was pierced. I couldn't remember his eye color. He was so pale, with jet black hair with red tips which went past his shoulders. He wore all black and dressed a bit like an emo. Looking back now, he reminds me and kind of looks like Dracula from the movie Van Helsing. He was on his phone and looked up at me as I walked towards him, and he just stared at me as I walked past. I gave him a slight courteous nod and smile and carried on going. He just looked me up and down with a smirk, which unsettled me. He didn't say anything and I managed to get home and didn't think much of it and forgot all about it. The next night I went to work, I finished my shift and walked through the park, and again, there he was. He was on his phone, wearing all black hair in a ponytail. He looked up to see me and smiled. I smiled back, but walked a bit faster past him. Again, he said nothing. This happened the next night, but on the 4th he wasn't there. I walked through the park as usual, but I felt so uneasy. It was pitch black, no lights except for the moon, and what do I hear? Footsteps, quick footsteps behind me. So I turn around and see nothing. I wasn't taking any chances though, So I ran through the park, and I swear over the sound of my heart beating fast and my footsteps, I could hear the sound of twigs snapping and leaves crunching. After that, I started getting a lift home for about 2 weeks from a friend. Then, that friend went on vacation, so I had to start walking home through the park again. The first night, which was Monday, the man wasn't there, but I still felt uneasy, like I was being watched. And on the second he was, sitting on that same bench, smiling at me. But this time he spoke, in a very deep voice. "Hey baby, love the tights and skirt. Damn." I was wearing a black skirt and sheer tights, with thick black thigh high socks, and Doc Martens, with a black biker jacket and a thick scarf. I had to wear all black for work, and I looked at him awkwardly, smiled and hurried away. The next few weeks, he'd be in the park and made lewd comments, and always sat on the bench. I'd try and get lifts home where I could, but there would always be times I'd need to go through the park. Lord, I hated that walk. One night, things escalated. I walked through the park as usual, and again he was there, sitting smiling at me. I did my best to ignore him, and he made comments about my body and what he wanted to do to me. As I was walking away, I was out of the light and could only see 2 to 3 feet in front of me. I must have been about 20 feet away when I hear running behind me and turn around. Someone runs at me at full speed and knocks me to the floor. I feel a heavy weight on me, and instantly I feel hair on my face and a hand over my mouth. A familiar deep voice in front of me tells me not to fight it, and that if I don't, it'll be over quicker. That's when his hands start to wander. I can hear his zipper, and that's when I know what's coming. He's mentioning how he's been waiting to do this for so long, and he took his hand off my mouth, and that's when I took my chance and bit him really hard. He screamed. He sat up, and I could barely see what I was doing. But I took that opportunity and pushed him off me and started to run, and heard him running after me. I got to the first gate that I usually leave by and was mortified to see it was locked. I could see it had a lock on it because the lamppost on the other side shone onto the usually open gate. I was so confused, but I could hear him shouting and started to run again, and I ran towards the other gate. It was closed, but not all the way. There was a small gap, and I just squeezed through it, leading to the skate park. He tried to grab me, and I turned and looked at him for a few seconds, catching my breath. He stared at me, and then started to try and fit through the gate, so I booked it as fast as I could. I ran towards the skate path park. The skate park was full of bushes. On one side of the path that ran through it, it also had a long dark path which after about 20 minutes leads to a main road, but it's usually completely empty. I ran through the skate park and hid in the bushes waiting for him, since if I had run onto the path I'd be visible and he'd be able to see me and chase me, and since no one was around I'd stand no chance. The path that leads to the road had very few lights, but still had enough so he'd see me and be able to follow me. I sat in the bush, hiding, hand over my mouth. I sat there for a minute when I saw him running through the skate park looking for me. He slowed down near the exit path, which led to a long path, and he stood there for a minute just sniffing the air. No joke, he was sniffing it. His hair wasn't in a ponytail anymore. It was all over him. He wasn't wearing a coat. He wore a long-sleeved shirt that was all black. It was winter, which confused me since it was so damn cold. And he looked around, and I felt his eyes scan me. Then he kept looking and started walking down the long path. After about 10 minutes, I felt it was safe and ran back towards the park, and ran into the park and ran to the gate I usually go through to get home. It was still locked, so I just climbed over it. I walked towards the school following the path I always used to, and had a strange urge to look back. And there he was. At the gate, the man was just standing, just watching me. He laughed and said, "I'll catch you one day, baby girl, mark my words." He blew me a kiss and walked away into the darkness. I've never been so scared in all my life. I booked it home and told my mom what happened. She called the police and council and asked why the fence was locked. The council were just as confused as we were because the gate was never supposed to be locked, ever. The police couldn't do much. They put a warning out and that was about it. The creepy thing was he had to have learned my pattern. He had to have known I used the park every night to get home. It creeps me out to this day, knowing I was being watched and could have been assaulted or worse. I still have nightmares from time to time about him, and wonder what would have happened to me had I not gotten away, or had he seen me in the bushes. I stopped working at the pub and haven't used the park since. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's video and that the triggering story wasn't that graphic. I had to cut out some words and some descriptions because if you want to read the story yourself, links in the description, you can, to see the little bits I missed. But it was just because our favorite platform system will instantly demonetize some of those words, which, I can respect and understand. In any case, if you like the video, you know what to do. As always, a huge thanks to my lovely patrons whose help and support really does help me out. Thanks, guys. It means a lot. Like I said at the start, I actually narrated a story over on Forgotten Lives' channel about the Leatherman. A truly interesting story, a real man of mystery. And if you are so inclined, you can find the link on screen now and in the description to view it. It is pretty good. He's an awesome channel and I highly recommend him. But for now, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.